to the May 12th meeting of the Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee. Can everybody hear me well?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
perfect.
loud and clear.
Thanks, Vinny. My name is Elsie Encarnacion, and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is being called to order at 6:35 p.m. And tonight we are joined by Angel Muscane, our district manager, who is the staff liaison to our committee. I'm going to go over a few ground rules. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe the ground rules. So no one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click on the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you should use the raise your hand function there. If you're still having technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty to the staff. Members should not engage in back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions about the agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand. Chat should only be used to alert us of any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you may speak. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or a comment about subjects on the agenda, please also raise your hand through Zoom and wait to be recognized. We will now take attendance by roll call. Board members, you may unmute yourself and answer present when your name is called.
Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Elsie Encarnacion.
Present.
Ivy Hume.
Present.
Francis Mastroda.
Present.
Jessica Morris. Andrew is excused. Vinny Torres.
Present.
Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Stephen Villanueva. Candy Vasquez. You have quorum.
Thank you, Angel. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was also posted online. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to the agenda, to the adopting of the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom now. Seeing no objection, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes of our last meeting were also distributed to committee members ahead of time. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes. If you object to the adopting of the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom at this time. Okay, seeing no objections, the minutes for the full, sorry, I'm reading exactly from the script. We gotta fix that. Seeing no objections, the minutes of our committee meeting are adopted. Okay, Angel, will you say the announcements? Oh, thanks. And also note, please, that Jessica Morris is present.
The next meeting of the Landmarks, Land Use and Planning Committee will be held on June 9th at the regular time, 6:30. During that meeting, this committee will be voting on its recommendation for the Elevate Transit text amendment proposal that you will be hearing about this evening that will be subject to that public hearing. A number of other items are also included in the announcement that was shared with the committee and posted on the website. I don't think you guys needed to read that. But it's there. Yeah, that's all I had in terms of announcements. Oh, I'm sorry, no, I forgot. I did receive this evening at 5 o'clock the materials for the citywide hotel special permit application, which will be distributed to the board tomorrow and posted on our site and shared with the public there. That's all I have.
Thank you. Are you sure? Okay. All right. For informational updates. So I attended the two briefings held by the Department of City Planning. The first briefing had two topics. The first was Elevate Transit, which we heard about at our last meeting and having the public hearing for it at this meeting. The second was on the hotels text amendment. And the second briefing, which was held yesterday, was on the health and fitness text amendment, as well as the open restaurants, I believe, text amendment. So all of that information is held on the DCP website. I encourage our committee members to take a look at those presentations and at that information that is given there. They will come across our committee throughout its path. And so we will be hearing about two of them today, but just for your information and to gather any questions that we can give to DCP ahead of time and ahead of those presentations, since that information is available, we should take a look through it, especially in regards to the open restaurants and also the health and fitness, I think are really going to be instrumental in our community. So take a look at that. And I also attended the, what is the website? I believe, Angel, can you drop in the website, the DCP website? And then I'll read it aloud into the chat. And then also, sorry, mine I just lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. So lastly, I attended the 145th Street project that's happening on Lenox Avenue. It's not in our district, but it's a huge development project that's taking place there. Multifaceted, a lot of, there's commercial, there's the museum, there's residential. There's a lot going on there. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of take a look and see like what the community concerns were and what how that district was dealing with that. We're going to have our own stuff coming up soon. So it's always good to kind of lend the ear and check out what's going on in other communities, especially our neighbors. And so also please take a look at that. And again, just for informational purposes and to know kind of how those developments go through the process of the zoning and being planned. So with that being said, we will now leave the presentations to the presenters. And I think the first is DCP with the hotels. Yes, the informational briefing by the Department of City Planning on proposed citywide hotel special permit. Matt, are you here and able to unmute?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. And I can actually drop that link in.
Perfect.
So this is kind of information on all the citywide texts that are going on right now.
Okay, perfect. And just for the public who may not have access to the chat, and for when these meetings are posted online, you don't normally see the chat. So I'm just going to read it aloud really quickly. So it's www.nyc.gov/site, SITE/planning/plans/citywide.page, citywide with a dash in between. Thank you.
Great. So I can go ahead and get started, but it looks like I can't share while somebody else is sharing. Oh, there we go. Great. Well, first, good to see some of you again. Might remember me from a couple years ago before I changed districts. I used to be in CB11. But for those of you who either don't remember or don't know me, my name is Matthew Petrus, and I work at the Department of City Planning in the Manhattan office. And I am on two screens, so if I'm looking to the right, it's just I'm looking at the presentation there. But okay, so I just want to be clear that there's going to be a lot of texts that are coming to you from our department. This one is kind of on its own. The other four are part of a suite towards pandemic recovery. This one has been in the works for a while and is a little bit separate. So what this is doing, it's fairly simple. It's proposing a new text amendment that would require all new hotels that are going to be built in the city to go through a special permit process, which means that it would be a full ULURP. So it would go through community boards, borough president, the city planning commission, and then the city council. And so why we're doing this, there have been discussions for several years now with the mayor's office, with community members, with community boards about whether or not hotels are appropriate in certain areas. And we've seen this growth of hotels be different throughout different neighborhoods. Sorry if you hear a cat in the background. And we've also implemented a few hotel special permits in different areas of the city. One of those is actually in East Harlem, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So this proposal is really just meant to consolidate all of those different special permits and create a consistent framework for hotel development. Just briefly on hotels and tourism in New York, we can see that it's been increasing. On the left, we see the NYC hotel and room supply. Since 2009, it's gone up quite a bit. So we've seen a rapid expansion of hotels. But with that, we've also seen a rapid growth in, or fairly steady growth actually, in visitor trends in NYC. And so we've actually seen that there's been high occupancy rates generally, with the exception, obviously, of 2020, where there was a halt of tourism because of the pandemic. So this rapid growth has kind of led to those special permits throughout the city that I mentioned. One that I think I actually presented to this board a few years ago was the M1 hotel special districts, special permits in those districts where we were seeing development of hotels and light manufacturing districts that weren't really in line with the types of uses that are there. And so that was one that we established and was adopted. And just to be clear, so that hotel special permit will remain because there's unique characteristics of industrial areas that we wanted to keep those findings for. But all of the other special permits for hotels are going to be wrapped up into this new one. So here's a map of all of those places where we do have current hotel special permits. So the pink is the most expansive, and so that's the M1 or the light manufacturing districts. And then we have different types of categories of special permits. We have harmonious development, which is really aimed at making sure that hotels are in line with the existing character. We have land use conflicts, which is somewhat similar to the M1 districts, but just for different types of uses. And then we have the residential development goals. So if you recall from the East Harlem rezoning, that one of the tenets of that rezoning was to spur residential growth. And so in order to do that, there was a hotel special permit implemented that said, before reaching about 3,000 residential units, new hotels are required to go through this special permit process to say there is sufficient space for these residential development goals that we have for the area. So this is just showing the breadth of where we're seeing hotel locations throughout the city. Obviously, a lot of those are in Lower Manhattan. And then as you kind of spread out from there, they get fewer and fewer. And so again, this is really just trying to create a consistent zoning framework for the approval of hotel developments. So these slides are a few examples of the land use challenges we've seen with hotels and their conflict with existing uses. Starting in the upper left-hand corner, we have the C8 district, the hotels in the background. And this butts up right against a manufacturing site on either side of it. And then across the street, there's a cemetery. And so the hotel use here is kind of in conflict with the types of developments that we're seeing in this neighborhood. And so this is the special permit that we're proposing is something that would help to mitigate that conflict. To the right, in the C43A district, we see a hotel in Queens that looks fine on its own, but then we kind of look at the conflicts that are going to be created between pedestrians on the sidewalk, which is in the foreground, and the required parking lot, which is behind it. So we're going to see cars going in, and then possibly having to slow down pedestrians, or kind of creating the conflict there between vehicles and folks walking down the street. And so a special permit would allow us to maybe reconfigure this and say, well, there might be a conflict if you put the parking lot here, right up against the sidewalk. And so that's something that would be modified likely throughout the special permit process if this was approved. The other districts we're looking at in the bottom left-hand corner, this is more typical of Lower Manhattan, where we see that hotels are set back from the sidewalk and break up this continuous street wall facade, which is something that is a benefit in a lot of neighborhoods. And then finally, in the bottom right-hand corner, we see a hotel that's actually right next to the beach in Queens, which is a very appropriate place for a hotel. for visitors to go to the beach and see New York's waterfront. But here we have this hotel that's budding it's right on its lot line. It might push pedestrians into the street because of the narrowness of that sidewalk. And so this is all of these are just examples of how the use itself as a hotel might conflict with the surrounding uses in the neighborhood. The areas of applicability are everywhere. So everywhere where a hotel can currently be built, it would need to go through a special permit if this were to be approved. The areas in pink are the new areas where the special permit would apply, and the areas in gray are where we already have existing hotel special permits, and some of those would be consolidated under this umbrella hotel special permit. But again, the light manufacturing hotel special permit is going to remain because there's specific findings to that, and the uses in industrial areas that we want to maintain. So what does that look like in East Harlem? So the applicability here is in all those commercial districts where hotels are currently allowed. And so we see those areas that are in pink. Those are areas, again, where there's no special permit currently and hotels can be built as of right. But now, if this is approved, these areas, if a hotel is going to be built there, would have to go through ULURP. And again, areas in gray, which are primarily, there's a couple of M1 districts as you get over towards the island, and then in the East Harlem Corridors district. Similar to M1, if you would have remembered, this proposal is remaining neutral on public purpose hotels or temporary shelters for the homeless. This is a legal obligation for the city to provide emergency shelter and to provide for social services that serve the needs of homeless populations. And this is something that we know has been, that raises concerns in some neighborhoods. But this proposal is remaining neutral. It's not requiring any additional regulatory hurdles for these things to be built, and it's not further incentivizing them to be built. And there's in no situation can somebody build a purpose-built, a public purpose shelter and then convert it to a hotel as of right if this were to be approved. Any type of conversion from one use to a hotel would require the special permit. So as I mentioned, we've been talking about this for a while, for a few years. This was before the pandemic happened. And so because COVID-19 has had such an impact on the hotel industry and tourism, we don't want to further exacerbate that impact, because between January and November of last year, we lost a total of 146 hotels out of 705 throughout the city. That meant that 42,000 rooms were closed. And most of those, over 96% of those, were in Manhattan. And with that comes the loss of jobs, almost upwards of 200,000 jobs lost in that industry. And so to respond to this, we're creating a series of exemptions and investing provisions that's going to allow for the recovery of the hotel industry while this proposal is, if this proposal were to be approved. So first, projects would be vested if they're going to be constructed as of right at the Department of Buildings. So if those filed with DOB prior to 2018, all they would need to obtain is a foundation permit prior to adoption. We anticipate adoption in November of this year. So if they have filed before 2018 and then obtain a foundation permit before November of this year, they can build their hotel and they would not have to seek the special permit. For projects filed between January 1st of 2018 and referral, which I believe is today, I'm sorry, it would have been last week, you received your materials today. They would need to obtain a zoning plan approval from DOB prior to the date of adoption. So it's a little less onerous than a foundation permit. And then both categories, instead of the standard 2 years to build the hotel, they would have 6 years from the date of adoption to complete construction. So we're also looking at hotels, projects that are with the City Planning Commission or with BSA that have a hotel component. So those projects would not require a special permit if they are approved after January 1st, 2018. And then applications that are currently, that begin public review or file with BSA prior to date of adoption, which is going to be in November, those will also not require a special permit. So that means that if there's a project that is referred that has a hotel component in July, it will not have to seek the special permit. If for some reason that project is delayed and it certifies in December, it will need that hotel special permit. Finally, we have extended discontinuance, where hotels that exist on the date of adoption, should they become vacant, can retain that use for 6 years instead of the standard 2 years. And so this is really meant for those hotels that currently exist. If the pandemic continues and tourism doesn't grow that quickly this year and they're not able to come back online, they'll have 6 years from date of adoption to not obtain that special permit. And this is really just a way to make sure that as tourism starts to come back to the city, which we all believe it will, there's going to be sufficient supply of hotel rooms to accommodate those tourists. So as with all projects, they go through environmental review. And so DCP issued a notice of completion of our draft environmental impact statement on May 3rd. And it did identify significant adverse impacts with respect to the hotel and tourism industry. Because of the additional regulatory hurdle of providing a special permit, we anticipate that this will slow the construction of hotels, and it's going to reduce the amount of rooms by our analysis year. That analysis year is 2035. And in that year, we anticipate a shortfall of about 47,000 rooms, and that results in an economic loss of about $8 billion. So we didn't identify any other significant adverse impacts, and possible mitigation measures are going to be explored between the draft and the final EIS. So with all that, the text affects a lot of the zoning resolution just because there's a lot of places where we mention hotels and hotel special permits, but this is kind of the gist of it. So this says that the commission shall find that such a hotel use will not impair the future use or development of the surrounding area. This is an intentionally broad finding because we didn't want to create a framework under which hotels that were going to be approved in Greenwich Village, those might be a little bit, the appropriateness of those hotels are going to be different than in East Harlem, and those are going to be different than in Astoria or in the Rockaways. And so that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Matthew, for your presentation. We are going to allow committee members to ask questions as well as the public. I'm just going to read through the rules once again. And so as per our script. So before we begin the discussion and taking questions, please be reminded of the following ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about the board business and wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions about the agenda. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. When a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you. You can unmute yourself so that you may speak. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. And members of the public, if you have a question or a comment, please wait to be recognized and raise your hand through Zoom. Committee members are asked to hold any motions until discussion period has ended. With that being said, I am going to now call hands. Oh, there's quite a few. Okay. I see Jessica Elliott followed by Vinny and then Jason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if we could go back to the map of our district. And I was curious, I was curious about how these locations were chosen because, for example, at the top corner of Central Park, that rectangle is a Section 8 housing building, my old apartment. So I was just curious about what the intention is in blocking out a lot, for example, that's already existing housing. And is there a thought that housing might convert into a hotel use, for example? Thanks so much.
Sure. So every area in pink are where hotels could be built as of right. It doesn't mean necessarily that these are all places where hotels would be built. We wouldn't anticipate that a Section 8 housing building would then be demolished and then a hotel would be built there. But that type of analysis would require kind of a site-by-site exclusion. And this is really just to make sure that anywhere where a hotel can be built is a place where we would have a special permit. And so these are our commercial districts, because those allow hotels, manufacturing districts, some of those allow hotels. But obviously the white areas, or maybe not so obviously, but the white areas are residential. And so those don't allow hotels as of right. So this is really just anywhere where a hotel could be built, regardless of what's there. It's not saying that anything will go there. It's just saying that if in the future, for some reason, something does go there, and it's going to be a hotel, that hotel would need to go through a special permit process.
Thank you for that, Matthew. The next was Vinny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Matthew, thank you for that presentation. Seems to be comprehensive. Two things. Got a couple of questions, but one, will you be able to share this presentation with the board, and will you be able to share the DIS that was put together with the board as well?
Of course.
Thank you.
So I can send this, I'll send this to Angel after the meeting. And then our environmental impact statements are always published on our website, but I'll also send that along, that link along as well.
Thank you. You mentioned during your presentation the purpose need map, not this slide. Can you go to the purpose need slide? I think it was a few slides before this one. Yeah. So I really can't tell from this, but if I'm looking at it correctly, it doesn't seem like the East Harlem area has any dots in it. Do you have a breakdown of our district as it relates to the purpose need? And can you answer, were there any locations, or were there any included in this map for East Harlem? Because I don't see any.
Sure. So just to be clear, the dots here are the location of existing hotels. There may have been one or two that are missed if there are some that opened up. Some hotels are easier to find than others. Best Western, when you Google those, they can pop up. Sometimes there's smaller hotels that may be left off this list, but I believe the last time we did look at this, there were very few, if any, hotels in East Harlem. That's not saying, that doesn't mean that there isn't a purpose and need in this district. It's just saying that citywide, we're looking to create a consistent framework for hotel development. In some areas, there's a lot of hotel development. In other areas, there's not a lot of hotel development.
Right.
And that also doesn't necessarily mean that hotels in either of those places are inappropriate. It may make sense for East Harlem to have a hotel in the near future with a lot of the economic development that's going on.
Right. Which is my next question. You mentioned that there was a permit issue now. So on that permit, you said it was in East Harlem. So can you tell us where that site would be, and does that site meet the pre-grandfather threshold, if you will, based on when the special permit would apply if passed?
I don't know that I mentioned a specific site in East Harlem, but if it were to,
you mentioned that there was a permit issue in East Harlem. You didn't mention the site. I'm asking, has there been a permit issue?
Oh, I see. Are you asking me if anything?
Right.
I'm not sure if there's any sites that would actually fall under these vesting provisions. That's something I can take back to the team to see if they have a list of sites that would be vested with DOB.
Now, and my last question, thank you for that. You mentioned, a wide myriad of requirements that will fall under now the special permits, which during the presentation, you guys have selected obvious depictions of where there will be an absolute need for the special permit. My question is, you didn't speak anything on workforce development. So my question would be, on the special permit, are you going to implement anything regarding workforce development? You're going to tell these guys where they can put sidewalks at, and how far they need to be for the sidewalk and all that, which is great. But what about workforce development? Is there anything being included as it relates to local hiring efforts, as it relates to union projects, non-union requirements, or wage scale requirements for any type of open shop, married shop development that exists with this type of development? A lot of them do go open shop and non-union, Matthew. So there's an issue at times on a lot of these projects with what wage earnings are obtained on this project? So I want to know, has any of that been included in this?
The short answer is no. There are no wage requirements or hiring requirements in this proposal, and there actually don't exist any of those requirements for any other type of special permit in zoning. Zoning is really about regulating land use and size of buildings. So what can be built and where and how big that building can be. It typically remains neutral on things like on wages and on who you're hiring and local practices like that. And that's something that's left up to other regulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. Jason, and then we have George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Matthew, for your presentation. Hotels, special permits, development automatically make me think about Airbnb, VRBO, and pretty much misused residential space. I haven't read the zoning text amendment, but I was concerned in our district with how and sometimes the misappropriated use of these spaces. Is there any thought from DCP about incorporating the special permit process with some of these other handlers that are pretty much renting out their apartments as hotels?
So if it's an illegal Airbnb, that won't be permitted through this text. And that's not something that we could actually regulate through zoning, or I'm sorry, enforce through zoning. So that's kind of an enforcement issue. So use group 5 is where this would apply. And so use group 5 is really just your standard transient hotels. It could be anywhere from 1 unit though to a number of units. So if any type of development has at least 1 hotel room in it, it would require the special permit. So I hope that answers your question. It's neutral on legal Airbnbs, but if there are illegal uses going on within buildings, this is not something that this would permit. Those would continue to be illegal uses.
Okay, thank you. George?
Great, thank you, Matthew. Okay, so hotel special permits in the M1 districts, it makes a lot of sense because of the conflict between uses. The special permit in East Harlem, the idea was you wanted to prioritize housing over hotels. It made perfect sense. You know, when I look at your images that you show, you know, we need a special permit here because of these bad designs. Well, couldn't the other projects that could be built there as of right have similar bad designs? And they wouldn't need a special permit, right? You know, the parking lot for the hotel is probably going to be in the same place as the parking lot for the retail that could go on that same site. So I guess, you know, my question to you is, can you talk a little bit more about like the whole purpose and need of this? And you know, because you know, just for the members of the board, you know, a special permit is a fairly big deal. Like it's a ULURP action. It's not as of right. And we generally reserve those for, you know, pretty significant actions. And so, you know, anyways, I'm wondering if you could just get into the whole why this needs to happen.
Sure. I think I'm understanding your question as to why hotels, right?
Yeah.
And what we've seen with hotels is that they're somewhat unique uses in that they're kind of commercial, they're kind of residential. And so there's a lot of different types of building forms that we've seen and different types of conflicts that can be created here. This is something that's been in discussions with various communities and community boards for a number of years. And we've just seen that these conflicts have arrived, particularly with this use. And that's why this special permit is seeking to regulate that.
Okay.
Is that all, George? I feel like
I mean, that wasn't, you know, if that's the answer, that's the answer. But okay.
Got you. All right, any other questions from the committee or comments? Again, this is the first time kind of taking a look at this. This presentation will be shared as well as the draft EIS, which is also on the website for the Department of City Planning. So please take a look at that and formulate any questions. We can shoot them over to DCP so that they can formulate some answers for us if one comes up after. I see Ivy raised her hand, and then I'm going to take it to the public. Go ahead, Ivy.
I guess I just was hoping Matthew could expound a little bit on his answer to George and rephrase it again. Sorry, I need to focus on it a little more.
Sure. I think it's really just that we have a unique use here that's a mix of a commercial development and kind of a mix of a residential development. And so these don't look like your walk-up apartments. These are not multifamily residential buildings. These also aren't office buildings. And so the foot traffic that comes in and out of these things is different than those types of uses. The loading is a little bit different. The parking is just different. And that those are not because of the requirements in zoning, but rather because of the use of a hotel. And so those are a few examples I showed are just showing that if these were to come through our special permit process, it's not going to say like, well, that hotel is inappropriate, don't put it there. It's going to say, okay, well, what about the uses on this site? Is it a great as it came in? Do we need to change anything, or is this something where maybe we need to make sure that this use doesn't conflict with its surrounding uses?
That was a new hand, right, Ivy?
Yeah, I don't think it really answers George's question. So that's, I think, why I'm a little bit confused. Because I just thought the question was more about how how there would be significantly less hotels as a result. Anyway.
Is your question about the adverse impact that I discussed?
Well, okay, so my question was really, about the adverse impact, but I mean, Ivy's point was like, it was all implied that, if you're going to have a special permit, it's a significant impediment to development, and so you're going to see less hotel applications, probably. We don't know that, but you haven't seen very many special permits in the M zones for hotels. I know that. And it's a hurdle, right? It's a hurdle. And so if you have two choices for this commercial district, you have one that's as of right and another that requires a special permit. It makes the as of right scenario much more attractive. I mean, listen, I get the whole idea of bad design, right? And being able to improve it through a discretionary review process. I wish we could do that more often. I think it would be make for a better city, especially in our commercial districts. But it's just not typical. I mean, this just is so not New York City in a lot of ways, because we have so few, broadly defined uses like this that require a special permit. I mean, special permits are for, airports and landfills and things that, are fairly significant, large parking garages, I guess. And I don't know, it's just an odd thing that was wondering if there was more, a better way of justifying the purpose and need for this. And I don't think there is, I guess is what the answer is.
Okay, thank you, George. We're going to take the question from the public. I believe it is Pilar D. You may unmute. Pilar, are you able to unmute?
See, sorry, I couldn't hear if that was me.
No problem.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Oh, of course, my earpod would die. So I guess my question is, I have a lot of things, but I'm just going to keep it short for right now. When was the last EIS? That would be my first question. And, I made some comments in the chat around, us not needing any more shelter hotels. I'm curious that why, even the city, I'm not sure. I understand that the, hotels have the right to do it, but I don't even know why the city's even asking for special permits. I agree a lot with what George says. I think, and to talk around what someone else mentioned, will there be any like community benefits? I assume that these hotels are going to be big corporation hotels that have a lot of access to money, again, big corporate hotels. So it may be something for the community board, if this goes through, even without the blessing of the community, that we considered as a community what kind of benefits agreement or real true benefits, a reparation tax, because I'm tired of these big corporate companies coming into our community and hotels, whatever, and they don't actually help us sustain any benefits in the community. As much as I love quote workforce, I want us to focus about more entrepreneurship, more about programming, and these corporations area. I don't know who's coming in, but I don't want to assume it's little hotel coming in asking for special permits. It's big ones, and if so, that we should think as a community what type of taxes they should pay us as a community as they make money off of our community. Okay, I understand the city will make money, but we as a community, CB11 especially, when the community board mentions all the budget stuff that's needed for, and as we know what's needed for this community, that these hotels, if it goes through, that they pay a tax to us. But I just curious, the EIS, especially with us knowing with the project resiliency project, or excuse me if I'm saying the name wrong, when it comes to flooding in this community, why are we still even considering building? Again, I don't know, looking at that, because I could barely see it, but I can't tell based on that comparison to what the project worked on. But we are in a community that we all know, and it's been said that if we were hit, if Sandy were to take a little wind to the left or right or whatever direction it was, we would have been far Rockaway. And again, I can't tell where those hotels are being built, but we keep building and building. And I hear it, we need to make money, the economy, but we also have a real serious crisis, housing crisis in this, and mental health crisis in this city. And I don't think hotels, unless these hotels are going to be somewhere where we can house and have holistic mental health services, to be able to, so that there could be like a retreat available for the mental health instability that this city is going through and that will continue to go through, especially when the eviction memorandum eventually is uplifted. Thankfully, the governor extended it again, but there's a rent relief, but that's not going to help. So
can you hear me, Pilar?
And I'm sorry, I'm going to cut it right now, but like EIS, when was the last EIS? And I think that Pilar, if it was before this new resiliency project was done, I think it needs to be redone, or I don't know how is flooding taken into account with this, because in my opinion, and I've said this at the board numerous times, I've said this to the MPA, I've said this to everyone in this the city that I can talk to. I mean, and I know nothing about I know we're on the rock, and people be like, no, Pilar, you're silly. We can't sink. But we keep building and 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 building. We say, oh,
Pilar,
we have 600,000 homeless people and growing if building was actually helping. And
Pilar, can you hear me now?
Sorry. Okay. Oh, sorry. Was I not?
Yeah, I was hoping you probably couldn't hear me. Your sound was a little bit off, but you are also kind of picking up a lot of time on the question. So I know.
Yeah, I'm done. Sorry. Yeah, I'm done.
Not a problem.
Sorry.
I know that the question was about the date of the last EIS. Matthew, if you can answer that, and we're going to move forward on the agenda. Thank you.
Sure. It was May 3rd.
Yes. Thank you.
So I think that was in reference to the zoning for coastal flood resiliency projects.
May 3rd of 2020?
2021.
So it was
just issued.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I also just want to clarify that this is not a development proposal. This is a text amendment proposal. This is saying that how we regulate hotel uses will change in the future. It's not saying that anything is going to be built. Because of this, that we actually found that it will have slow development, so it will do the opposite. But there are this project is not development inducing in itself, so there's no building that will be built as a direct result of this proposal.
Thank you, Matthew. I understand. And also, like we said, this is information.
Okay, can I just ask really one quickly?
Pilar, I'm
to
sorry,
that
I'm gonna have to
follow-up?
move forward. It's 7:20 and we still have another presentation. We will have opportunities to respond or give comments to DCP regarding the hotel text amendment. So, and we will do so. And so, yeah, I'm gonna have to just put a pin in it for right now. And then we're gonna move on to the next one, which is our public hearing for our Elevate Transit, which is also going to be run, I believe, by DCP, but maybe someone else in that department. So Angel, if you can, I'm sorry, Matt, can you, yes, thank you, the screen share thing. Did we lose Angel? Oh no, he's there.
No, you can't lose me. So it should be Jose and team on for the Elevate.
Thank you. Okay.
Or Annie?
Hi, I'm part of the DCP team that will be presenting tonight.
Okay, great.
I'll actually be the one sharing the presentation.
Perfect.
You're free to present. Do I have you on the right list? Hold on. No, I will promote you, Tony. Then you'll be able to. Okay. You should be free to go now.
Brief introduction. Hi all. Annie and Jose and I are here and we're taking your comments and questions, and you should still feel free to reach out to us for both of these applications. Again, we're just bringing in our colleagues who are more experts on these two text amendments to do the presentation so that they can better answer your questions. But just wanted to say that Jose and I are here and listening.
Thank you, Annie.
Okay, and can folks confirm they can see the presentation?
Yes,
Okay.
we can see.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So thanks for having us. So my name is Tony Lechuga. I work for the Department of City Planning. So I'm joined tonight by Marcus Book from the MTA. So we're going to go through a brief overview of this zoning text amendment that aims to improve ADA access throughout the city. And we're here to answer any questions. You can also find more information on the website that's on the screen right now. And we're asking for your recommendation to the City Planning Commission on this proposal. So official recommendations are requested from all 59 community boards, borough boards, and the borough presidents by June 14th. So our proposal is born out of the idea that in 2019, New York City Council Land Use Division published the Let's Go report entitled Zoning for Transit Accessibility. And that proposed strengthening existing zoning tools to accelerate the implementation of ADA access throughout the city. So today we're proposing a citywide text amendment that builds on the ideas that were laid out in that City Council report. So this is a citywide text amendment that proposes to expand two specific existing tools to help better coordinate private development that is already happening and station improvements. And so to kick us off, I'm going to turn it over to Marcus, who's going to sort of talk about the MTA's side of this, sort of like where the MTA is at and why this is a right time for that proposal. So Marcus.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Most of you know me. I have not dealt with the Land Use Committee before. And again, my name is Marcus Book. I'm with New York City Transit's Government Community Relations. So where is the MTA at right now with accessibility status? Just to begin, the MTA and New York City Transit is over 100 years old. Most of our stations were constructed before 1950. And as a result, less than 30% of subway and Staten Island Railway stations are currently accessible. The MTA system also includes Long Island Railroad and Metro North Railroad. And while about 65% of commuter rail stations are accessible, the greater interval between commuter rail stations magnifies the impact each inaccessible station has on the rider. So what are the impacts of such limited elevator access? Well, increasing accessibility is a key step in modernizing the city's transit system, as the lack of elevator access in stations affects many New Yorkers who have a hard time navigating stairs. These riders include people with physical disabilities, clearly, seniors, parents with young children, people with temporary injuries, and even just people who are transporting heavy objects. And in order to navigate the system, these customers rely on accessible stations, which may not be close to their origin or their destination point. The result is that a subway ride that should take minutes can take hours. And for these riders, more elevators throughout the system would allow for shorter, more direct trips. And this segment of the population is not insignificant. Of the 8.4 million residents in New York City, over 500,000 have an ambulatory disability. We have 500,000 children under the age of 5, and more than 14% of the population is over 65. Moreover, our seniors in New York is growing. Seniors are growing in New York more than twice the rate of the total population. And as the city's population is growing older, there is increasing reliance and need for accessible stations. Making the system accessible for all our customers must be an urgent priority, and is an urgent priority for the MTA. So, to address these deficiencies in our current transit system, the MTA prioritizes accessibility improvements and other station improvements in their capital programs. The current 2020-2024 capital program dedicates over $5 billion to making 77 subway, Metro North, and Long Island Railroad stations accessible. When this capital program is completed, 43% of subway stations will be accessible. Additionally, one goal of the capital program is to ensure that no subway rider is more than 2 stations away from an accessible station. The current capital program targets stations in all 5 boroughs in order to ensure that this goal is met. And in spite of the ongoing pandemic, the MTA is acting on these goals. In the last year, the MTA opened 11 new ADA stations and awarded more than a dozen new ADA station projects. So what are the challenges? So we talked about the age of the system. And as a result of it, progress can be slow because elevator construction in subway stations is particularly challenging for many reasons. As I mentioned before, stations are old and have a complex infrastructure, which make installing an elevator expensive and in some cases impossible. Within stations, platforms can be narrow, limiting the locations where an elevator can be placed. And at the sidewalk level, existing buildings near stations can prevent elevators from being built in the optimal place. And sidewalks themselves can be too narrow to allow for clearance for an elevator. Additionally, subsurface conditions present decades worth of highly complex utility infrastructure, including sewers, water pipes, and electrical cables. Because of these unique challenges, often the preferable, or in some cases only solution, is to place the elevator and corresponding circulation elements within private property. This is not unprecedented, as there are already dozens of station stairs and elevators integrated within private properties throughout the city. So now that we've given you a background on where we stand at the MTA, I'll pass the presentation over to Tony, who will continue the remainder of the proposal.
Thanks, Marcus. So I just want to emphasize that What we're proposing is meant to work in conjunction with the MTA's capital program in order to help advance those types of benefits that they're providing at a faster pace. So there are already zoning tools in place today that help alleviate some of the burdens that we see in construction, and they can help support construction of new transit improvements. So those two specific things are transit easements and station improvement bonuses. And I'm going to talk about each of those independently throughout the presentation because they're both a part of our proposal. So by leveraging those station access improvements in places where investment is already occurring, we believe this will help speed up construction and provide increased benefits. So the first part of the proposal is transit easements. So let's look at the current easement provisions as they exist today. So they help us address challenges of locating new station entrances. So an easement is a small permanent space in a building that is reserved for the transit agency to use in the future. So the transit easements have traditionally been used to provide new station entrances, but they can also provide passageways and other facilities that support subway lines like emergency exits or ventilation structures. However, the existing easement provisions that we have are limited to a few parts of the city. And your community board is actually one of them along the future 2nd Avenue subway line. But that is one of the few areas of the city where easement provisions already exist. And as such, the city has missed out on many opportunities where new development was happening adjacent to transit stations and would have been an optimal place to locate ADA access, but there just wasn't the zoning in place to do that. And this image on the screen shows that exactly, where new development happened adjacent to a station without an easement. The second part of our proposal is expanding on this part of the zoning resolution that contains transit bonus mechanisms. So these also help support the creation of transit improvements. Currently, in the densest commercial districts in the city, what we've done is create an incentive for developers to provide both the space, but also to construct station improvements, including ADA access. And we do this through floor area bonuses that provide them additional development rights. Again, though, these provisions are limited to sites that are immediately next to subway stations and are in the central business districts of the city. So they're somewhat limited in their applicability. So to address the limitations of those and expand them, we're proposing zoning for accessibility, or ZFA. So the proposal seeks to create more opportunities for accessibility throughout the transit system by using these zoning tools. So again, the proposal consists of two things. The first is to expand the transit easement requirements system-wide to most station adjacent sites and provide zoning flexibility where easements are provided in order to offset burdens on development. And the second part is to increase participation in the transit bonus program by increasing its area of applicability to other high density areas of the city specifically. Okay. So let's talk about each of these independently. So first is the system-wide easement requirement. So it would require that all developments and enlargements on zoning lots that are within 50 feet of a mass transit station and in applicable zoning districts would have to file an application with the MTA and the chairperson of the City Planning Commission to determine whether or not an easement is needed on that zoning lot for future station improvements. So again, within 50 feet of a station and applicable districts, and those are on the screen here. So all districts that are at or above R5, commercial districts with residential equivalents above R5, including C7s or C8s, and then all manufacturing districts. So while the certification would be required for all sites within 50 feet of a transit station, it's anticipated that the MTA would only ask for an easement in limited places that are best suited for access and require other improvements. So let's look specifically at Community District 11. So this is an illustrative map showing where ZFA would be applicable. The red line shows the boundary of the community district. The light green dots show the stations where the proposed easement requirement would be in place, which in this community district is all of the stations. Then the dark green areas that are around the stations show zoning lots that are within 50 feet of an eligible station. And that's where an easement may be required for all developments or enlargements. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you can essentially see we drew a bubble around each station that extends 50 feet based on the station footprint. And then any lot that is captured within that 50 feet that is also within the applicable zoning would have to seek this certification to determine, is it a good spot for an easement or not? So the transit agency, in consultation with the developer and the chair of the CPC, would determine the necessary easement for future station upgrades. So depending on the needs of the station, the transit easement can vary in shape and size. Vertical easements can take up several floors of a new building. A horizontal easement can have a footprint that varies a lot depending on whether it's needed for an elevator or new station entrances, and things like that. And so because easements are all very different in shape and size, they can affect development sites in a number of different ways. So it can take up floor area by occupying several floors. It can restrict ground floor uses, and it can even create compatibility issues with whatever its neighbors are that are adjacent to it. So without any zoning relief, a development could be limited to its from achieving its sort of full potential and harmony with its neighbors. So as part of this proposal, embedded in the text is zoning relief for easements. So to make sure that easement creates minimal challenges for the area around it, on a given site, the zoning will provide targeted relief in these 5 categories. And I'll go over each of these 5 categories now. So the proposed floor area and open space relief includes these 2 things. So excluding easements from the floor area calculations. This allows developers to still reach their maximum FAR despite the easement. So the easement would not count as part of their development. And secondly, to make sure easements are placed at optimal locations on their site, they would be considered permitted obstructions. And where applicable, we would increase the maximum lot coverage. The proposed height modifications would allow for sites to increase their maximum height by 10 feet to allow for developable floor area that would be taken up by an easement. So it's really just relocating some of that space to the top floor if necessary. For R7 districts and above, where there's a need for above grade easements due to elevated station platforms, that maximum height increase could be up to 20 feet. And there would also be greater street wall flexibility within 15 feet of easements, just to create better flow around them, because we anticipate, many people coming and going. Use allowances are proposed to help activate spaces around easements. So this includes allowing vacant easements to be temporarily used as commercial spaces until such time as the MTA is ready to develop there. And it also includes allowing local retail uses within 30 feet of easements in residential districts. This is really just to avoid a situation where there's an easement placed immediately adjacent to someone's residence. I don't know that that's very desirable for most people. So modifications to streetscape requirements would also be provided by excluding general streetscape rules, like ground floor use regulations, transparency rules, and some planting regulations. And to ensure that there's safety of transit users entering and leaving stations, we would ensure that curb cuts would be restricted within 30 feet of all easements. So every site is unique and has potential additional challenges. So this proposal allows for even further flexibility for uniquely constrained sites through an additional authorization. So the first part of the easement is just a certification, but if that site thinks that it's especially unique and needs additional relief, they can seek an authorization, which becomes a discretionary action. So that would actually get referred out to the community board. And as part of that authorization, they could specifically seek additional height increases of up to 25%. Or if they wanted to request more height relief than 25%, they would need to seek a special permit, which would go through the full ULURP process. So those were put into the text just to create an out for sites that can demonstrate that they are especially unique and constrained in their design and would potentially need those. The odds of that happening would be more limited because it's a far more arduous process than just a certification. And so also, while the easement requirement only applies to developments and enlargements on lots that are 5,000 square feet, easements can also be provided voluntarily on sites that are smaller. And for those small sites that choose to provide an easement, if the MTA and CPC thinks that it's a good spot for an easement, the same zoning relief would apply to them as well. And that's the first part of ZFA, is the system-wide easement requirements. The second piece of the proposal is an expanded transit bonus program. So this would be optional for sites that are near mass transit stations. So as I mentioned before, today's subway bonus mechanism grants a floor area bonus of 20% for a significant station improvement, but it only applies to station adjacent sites in limited areas of the city. So with ZFA, the proposed transit bonus program would do two things. One, it would continue to grant a floor area bonus of up to 20% of the maximum floor area ratio for developments and enlargements that construct significant station improvements. And two, it would expand the geography of where the transit bonus can be used. So the bonus itself would be subject to a discretionary review process in the form of an authorization. So it would go to the City Planning Commission, then it would get referred to the Community Board, and then sent back to the City Planning Commission. So not a full ULURP, but still a discretionary review. So the idea behind this is the bonus would expand the geography to other high density areas. So it includes all R9 and R10 districts in the city and their commercial equivalents and M16 districts. So the new transit bonus would allow sites that are within 500 feet of a station to participate in the program in exchange for an off-site improvement that would be constructed at a station that is not immediately adjacent to the site. So in this picture, this illustrative example on the screen, any of those blue lots would be eligible to provide a station improvement to that specific station. So it's that the lot isn't immediately adjacent to the station, but it's within 500 feet. Okay. So in terms of Community District 11, so this is again an illustrative map of your community district. The red line is your district. The blue dots, I'm sorry, there are no blue dots here. The pink dots, the pink dots show the stations where the proposed transit bonus would now be applicable. So it would expand the program to all the sites within community district, to all the stations within Community District 11. The orange color show sites that are within 500 feet of the station and have the applicable zone, high density zoning. And those are sites that would now be eligible to participate in the program. So to receive the bonus, the development would have to construct what's considered a significant station improvement. The improvements can vary depending on what that station needs and the amount of bonus sought. So it's up to 20%. That doesn't mean that every development will get 20% or that they'll even seek 20%. It's important to note that if a station doesn't have ADA access, that has to be the very first improvement that is provided to that station. A developer cannot provide anything else before they provide that. The floor area that's generated from the bonus can only be occupied by that developer once the MTA determines that the improvement is complete and usable by the public. So if needed though, developments could seek additional relief from the zoning provisions. So even if they're seeking the bonus and they receive it, or they would receive it, depending on what the applicant seeks, modifications can either be subject to an authorization. So this is the same as it was for the easements. If a development comes and says the 20% isn't enough, we need to increase the height up to 25% in addition to the bonus, they could seek a special permit. Or I'm sorry, they could seek an authorization. If it's higher than that, they would have to seek a special permit, which would go through full ULURP. So that's the same as the easements. And then other relief could be made through further discretionary reviews and approvals if those sites felt like they needed something specifically different. And that could be a change in use, parking, loading, streetscape, any of those things. So in conclusion, I just want to recap these few things. So zoning for accessibility proposes 1, a system-wide easement requirement that would require all new developments within 50 feet of MTA stations and within applicable districts to seek a certification determining if they must provide an easement. That is the only discretionary review that is proposed in the text. The second part is an expansion of the transit improvement bonus program that allows for a floor area bonus in exchange for significant transit improvements. And this happens through an authorization. And then at the bottom, I included information about, both the easement and the bonus provisions would be allowed further zoning modifications, specifically related to unique site conditions. And they would have to seek those through an authorization. If they had severely constrained sites and they wanted to seek additional height increases of 25%, they would have to go through a special permit. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we're currently in the public review process. We're asking for recommendations, again, from all the community boards, and borough presidents. We would love to have those by June 14th of this year. Thanks for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you, Tony, and I'm sure we have questions. We are going to take questions from the committee first, and then we're going to hear comments from the public. I will say, anytime I hear incentives for developers that end in extra height and floors, it gets my attention, especially when things like significant changes, I'm not sure exactly, or significant additions, not sure exactly if there's a monetary addition to part of that, or if there's something like very specific, because I know that we're giving away very specific amount of height as an incentive. So I'm just wondering if there is a specificity to that word significant and unique.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a complicated one because the bonus is anywhere from 1 to I assume you're talking about the bonus. So the bonus is anywhere from 1% bonus to up to a 20% bonus, and it's for a significant station improvement. And so some of that can depend on the site. A site on a 5,000 square foot lot is very different than a site on a 50,000 square foot lot. And so 1% of 5,000 is very different than 50,000. And so so there's a lot of variability. So we didn't want to tie it specifically to, like a 5% bonus is this particular amenity, or a 20% bonus is this particular amenity. That's why there's sort of the discretionary review process, so that a developer could say, this is what my site looks like. This is the percentage bonus I want, and this is what I'm willing to offer as a significant station improvement. And then, the MTA, the CPC, and you as the community board could all weigh in on that decision in determining, is that benefit commensurate with the bonus that's being offered? And that's why there's a lot of discretion to it, because of the difficulty in measuring those. But it is important to note that the improvements are specifically related to ADA access and pedestrian circulation. So the first benefit that has to be provided at any station that's not ADA accessible is ADA access, so in the form of an elevator. But if one exists at a station, then the MTA can say, like, yes, we could use other things like new stairs or new passageways that lead to station platforms, different things like that. And so there is sort of a limit to how much benefit can be provided in the sense that the station can only be improved so much.
Yeah. So prior to this meeting, we had shared also a memo that was created by George. I hope most of you got to look through it, read it. There were some maps there, and especially talking about the impact it would have in East Harlem and how that looks or could look if all of these things kind of fell into place in terms of what happened during the rezoning and what's applicable in the rezoning, and on top of with the easement on top of that, or the floor bonus on top of that in the height. So George, if you had any comments, I would like to give you a moment to speak, and then I'm going to take Jessica Morris, I'm sorry, and then Vinnie Torres.
Sure. Thank you. So yeah, I did prepare the memo. I can answer questions about it. I just want to point out just to emphasize the graphics in it are, completely theoretical, right? They're based upon the 2017 reasonable worst case development scenario for the East Harlem rezoning. And it just essentially is a math problem in terms of adding the bonuses to those sites, depending on whether they qualify or not. But I do have a question, if I may, for Tony. Tony, here's my question: is that when you look at the stations that qualify for the bonus, they're mostly in Manhattan, and they're all with these R9 and R10 districts. And so the thing that I think about equity in this situation, right? People in the Bronx and Queens and Brooklyn, they need elevators too. And the idea that we're still, right now the bonus is very small in terms of the area. So now we've grown it to most of Manhattan, okay. But the way it's written is that, you can't get the bonus out, way out in Brooklyn because it's not high enough density zoning. And I guess, did you really think of, can you explain the rationale for that? I mean, can you explain why Northern Boulevard doesn't get an elevator, or why it doesn't get a bonus for an elevator?
Yeah, no, that's a reasonable question. And equity is certainly something that many people have thought about in regards to this. And so I could say, so city planning's initial analysis in trying to determine applicability found that sites would have to be large enough to generate a substantial amount of floor area bonus in order to cover the cost of providing the required improvements, as well as costs and risks associated with the application and review process, because generally available bonuses are limited to 20%, more than otherwise allowed in a district. Like, only substantial sites in high density districts are really expected to see the type of development that could reasonably generate a bonus of this size. So that's why it was limited to those sort of like high density districts. In terms of equity, one of the things that we've tried to emphasize is that by leveraging private development that's already occurring, that means that the MTA's capital budget moving forward doesn't need to focus on those stations, and they can focus on putting their capital dollars in those areas where maybe we're not seeing private development capable of taking advantage of this opportunity.
Okay, Elsie had to step away. George, did you have any other comments? If not, we're going to move on to the members.
Should move on to the members.
Okay, thanks. Jessica Morris, followed by Vinnie Torres.
Thank you, Angel. Tony, I think that last answer was a little bit of like trickle down economics will solve the equity question. And I think that is never a good answer, though.
It's an answer.
It's an answer. Thank you, Francis. But it's not to laugh about, because I think, it's important to make those commitments as much as you're greasing the wheels to free up dollars to allow things to happen in places that this does not necessarily incentivize them to happen in through development. But to what we've got here, I'm not sure if you misspoke, but I just want to clarify that the system-wide easement is the only non-discretionary component, correct? I think you said it's the only discretionary component, but it's the only non-discretionary component, correct?
Yeah, it's the only non-discretionary component.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, and then I've got a couple points, and so maybe I'll just lay them out. And I guess one of the things that I first learned when I came to East Harlem and started listening to people who care about how things were going to play out in the rezoning that was underway here, was what larger scale retail does to a kind of a neighborhood vibe, small businesses, and the type of development that has impact on the street at the ground level. And so, I think with any, incentivizing of development, it is going to be with a certain character. And so, the concern being that, is there some suggestion that we can offer that might protect against a type of retail environment that would hurt small businesses as far as scale of, ground floor retail available? I know there's been some studies done on the west side about limiting some of those points. This isn't that. This is something different, but I think it does have an effect. So it's a concern I think we should bring up if we can, and that's not a question. But so the point at which you went from 50 feet to 500 feet, that was in order to increase the catchment for where bonus can land. Is that correct? And it's a two-way street, that the thing that provides the easement can give the bonus elsewhere or can accept the bonus there on site. So is that correct?
No. So the easement and the bonus are two completely
different things.
They need to be treated as sort of like two independent things. So easements will be determined based on the MTA and CPC saying like, this is a site that must provide an easement, and that developer has very little say in what they're allowed to do. And there's no bonus associated with that. There's simply the ability to increase the height by 10 to 20 feet, depending on the size of the easement. The bonus program is saying that like any building within 500 feet of the station platform that meets the applicable zoning, so that R9, R10 zoning, that station or that development can provide a bonus to the station that is within 500 feet of it, or can provide a benefit to that station and receive a bonus. And that's the extent of it.
Provide a space benefit. How benefit is determined as, classified as,
yeah, so the
vetted by.
Yeah, so the benefit is not just a financial contribution, it's not just a space-based contribution, it is them actually constructing a benefit. So either providing this, if they're adjacent to a station, they either provide the space and construction to provide that benefit, or if they're away from the station and providing it off-site to the station, then they would have to provide they would actually have to construct that benefit. And those benefits are, new elevator access, new escalators, new stairs, additional passageways to connect people to that station. So yes, the site might be 500 feet away from the station, but it can still pay for and construct that benefit at the station.
And a sort of a stewardship maintenance question, whether it's open space or circulation, that's something that gets negotiated in the discretionary, in the exchange between city planning and the developer with any community input. Or I think maintenance it's a part of the quality of how a place affects, its people. So where does that come into play?
Yeah, so I might actually turn that over to Marcus. The MTA might have a better answer about like who's responsible for maintaining and ensuring the function.
Maybe before we try to answer it, I think it's an open question of like who then maintains it and where in the process is that determined. I guess the last 2 points of question that I have, just so we don't get hung up too much. Or it's actually just a single point. I was walking this evening up to 125th Street and crossed Lexington at 116th Street. And I looked at El Barrio Music, and there were old guys jamming outside on the sidewalk, having a grand old time. that building is significantly, that corner, that intersection is wildly underbuilt. And I think, will this, George, you have some illustrations about how that can impact then all the way over to 3rd Avenue and the heights that would perhaps sprout on 3rd Avenue. I think Second Avenue subway is something that we hear ringing in our ears, even though it's maybe a decade away. I think it's not on the map. It's not on your map. It should be on your map because it's something, George says no. But I think it's something that when we think about effects and cumulative effects of what transit and transit-oriented development means for the district, it's something to consider and to have on the map as a concern, or at least it's in the brain. So my question is around specifically how place like 116th Street that needs it's not accessible. We have a sort of accessibility challenge in the heart of our district, 110th, 116th, 103rd. Right up through the center that doesn't meet these requirements of 2 stops away from an accessible station. So it's a prime place for accessibility to, is this new set of rules something that we don't already have? You mentioned that East Harlem kind of has this already. Do we have what's already here, or how does this differ or amplify what we already have?
Yeah, so I can answer that last part. That so East Harlem is one of the few districts in the city that is part of what's called the Special Transit Land Use District, which was established a long time ago to provide easements specifically for the future 2nd Avenue subway. And so there are some locations in East Harlem that have already been identified that have already been identified and constructed space for future easements. And those are still in place. Those complement ZFA. So this sort of expands where easements can be located to existing stations, but the ones for the future 2nd Avenue subway have been noticed and will continue to be noticed as new development occurs where those stations will in the future be located.
So my question about 116th Street.
Jessica.
Sorry, Angel, go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you repeat it then?
Yeah, my question is, that's a significant intersection in the heart of our district that is significantly underbuilt, and where there is already an existing set of easements, I believe, that there's a set of regulations that were a part of the rezoning process that already exist, but this would amplify those by some level. Is that correct? That there's something already there that does this here?
I'm not familiar with anything at 116th Street that was identified as part of the rezoning that does this.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to get a quick answer for Jessica's question, and then we're going to go on to the rest of the list of folks that have their hands up. George, can you speak real quick to 116 in Lexington, and then I'm going to move on to Vinny and Jason.
Oh, okay, yes. So 116 in Lexington, it was rezoned in the corners. Just the corner lots were all rezoned in the 2017 rezoning, and they were very upzoned to an R9 equivalent district with a 205-foot height limit. All of the lots would theoretically qualify for an easement. All of the lots would theoretically qualify for a bonus. At maximum for both, it would raise the maximum height to about 280 feet at that corner. All of the sites at that corner, right? I mean, so right now it's when you add on the 25% height bonus with the 20 feet possibility for an easement. Now, there's no elevators there, so I think it'd be good if they all placed it. And then finally on the 2nd Avenue subway, the Second Avenue subway is not on the map because it doesn't exist yet. I mean, up in East Harlem, right? And when it exists, well, then it will automatically appear because these aren't mapped, right? There are stations that, and so as stations grow and change, the areas change as well, right? So people will be measuring how far their lots are from station entrances or platforms or things like that to determine whether they qualify for the bonus.
So
Thank you, Chair.
just,
Thanks,
I
George.
guess,
Jessica, we have to move on.
sure, Angel, thank you.
Sorry, buddy, but like, yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, no, I mean, it's
Okay.
it's greasing the wheels, and there's a lot of questions, and I think
Yeah.
there's not much we can say. So what do we say that makes a difference here? Is
Yeah, and we still have time on our clock to get questions in and keep talking about this. So write them all down and we'll send them in.
Thank you, Angel.
Yeah, no problem. Who was it? Vinny Torres and then Jason Villanueva.
Thank you.
I like saying Villanueva.
Thank you, Angel. You know, it's a great name, by the way. I also like saying it. All right, so Tony, can you demonstrate or speak to what type of bonuses, for an example, the DIRTS organization can receive on 125th Street, right? We propose a scenario on the 125th Street, Second Avenue subway coming up 125th Street. New developers that are in the corridor now that are obviously slated, who've taken interest in the corridor, in the acquisitions of these properties. What would the benefits be for Exeter on 125th and Lex, DIRTS on 125th and Park? Those two specific as an example.
Yeah, so I don't know that I can speak to the second one, but I know that the DIRTS development that you're talking about is on Second Avenue, which doesn't have a transit station already, and so it wouldn't be applicable to that site at the moment. Like they wouldn't be able to get anything out of this.
I'm referring to DIRTS on Park Avenue on 125th.
Oh, at Park Avenue. I'm not familiar with that development, but you know, presumably any development that meets the requirements of ZFA could apply for a bonus. You know, whether or not they receive that bonus is up to discretionary review to say like what kind of bonus are they looking for and what are they willing to offer as an improvement. And that's, you know, where it becomes important for the community to weigh in on that and determine, are they providing enough or are they not?
Would that be the same for Exeter on Lexington and 125th Street?
Yeah, you know, they are also assuming that their site is within the proper zoning district, then yes. If they're not, then no. I'm not familiar with like that exact site.
That's an R8 equivalent district. It wouldn't qualify for the bonus.
Okay, then yeah, it wouldn't qualify. So.
George, would that be the same for Park Avenue where DIRTS is?
Oh no, the Park
Park Avenue qualifies, yeah.
Prime.
Thank you. Thank you. That was it.
Yeah. So just for before we move on, thanks, Vinny. Just for Tony's benefit, the shorthand, CB11 shorthand that Vinny's using, the DIRTS sites are on either side of the Metro North station at 125 and Park. So they own property on both sides. Okay. Vinny, was that it? Was that it for you? Before I move on? Yeah. All right, Jason.
I actually do want to say one thing about 125th there, because I think it's important for communities to know this, and I don't want you to think that it's not made aware to you. So sure. In terms of bonuses, other community districts have asked, like, what is the potential for stacking bonuses? And the one thing we've said is that the only bonus that can be stacked with the transit improvement bonus is the one that's associated with voluntary inclusionary housing, which does exist along 125th Street through your district. And so it's important for me to say that to all of you, that we didn't want developers to have to make a choice between affordable housing or transportation improvements. We didn't want to pit ADA access and affordable housing against each other. So if there is a development that is in a voluntary inclusionary housing area and within the 500 feet and appropriate zoning, they would be able to stack those two bonuses on top of each other, only those two. Just so that.
Thanks. Okay, Jason.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Tony, for your presentation. Yeah, you just answering about the stack was one of my questions in the thought process of like, who's going to pay for this? Because if the thought process is it's just all on the developer, there is no incentive. I need not tell you then that, that brings a concern with the cost of building the space. And then of course, there being affordable housing. So I thank you for your response. I just need to do some more research. Appreciate it. I'm sorry, and just as a comment, it's been on our statement of district needs and budget requests to make our stations accessible. So I appreciate the effort.
I just want to add, guys, that just so you know, in the current 2020-24 capital program, I believe that 110th Street is scheduled for a ADA improvement.
Angel, is it? I know we've had a couple discussions at Public Safety Transportation about communication with MTA, and I see Marcus here, and that's really a good thing. But I don't know if there's a way.
That is the Marcus book.
we were going to try to figure out how to tap that MTA point of communication towards PS&T. So I'm not sure if Marcus is our guy or if he can put us in the right direction.
The one and only Marcus book.
Marcus would love to hear more from you.
Marcus book is rocking the Cornell West. I'm going to get you after this meeting, Marcus. But yeah, that's our guy. Yeah. I can connect you guys to Marcus. Marcus, all powerful. Okay, so we have a hand from George, and then I think we need to go the formal public hearing part.
Yeah, just really quickly. So in the 2017 rezoning on 2nd Avenue, there's a height map, and heights are variable depending on if an easement is needed. Essentially, the easement height relief was hard coded into the height limits. And you can go all the way up to 325 feet on 2nd Avenue, which is if you have the right kind of easement in it for like these blower ventilation shafts. And I noticed that there are no changes to that area of the 2nd Avenue or the East Harlem Special District's rezoning. Was that an oversight? Because it would seem that if you're going to essentially allow this easement citywide, then this place where it's hard coded into the height limit with the easement noted should be changed.
Yeah, I know that none of the special transit land use district text was touched in crafting ZFA.
This is in the Harlem corridors, East Harlem Corridor Special District.
Okay, yeah, I know that this touches no other special district text or anything like that. It's a good question that unfortunately I don't know that I'm primed to answer. It's a good question.
I will send you the section of the zoning text.
Yeah, it's a good question for our zoning division that wrote the specific text for ZFA, and they would probably have a good reason for why that might have been excluded as a change.
Okay. Thank you.
George, one more from committee, Vinnie Torres.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Sorry. So George, on that same point, if they get the height limit due to the required easement, would then they, in a scenario like that, would then they be eligible to receive the bonus on top of the increased height limit?
Yes, that's my understanding. Tony can confirm.
Wow. How convenient. Thank you.
Can you rephrase it? I'm sorry.
The easement and the you can get both an easement bonus and a height bonus for the transit improvement.
Well, there's no bonus with the easement.
Easement allowance.
There's zoning relief saying you can get an extra 10 feet to
20 feet.
Well,
20 feet in East Harlem.
Okay,
right?
So that's the part that you were saying was built into the text, the specific text.
Well, no, I mean, meaning it's all R7 or above, right? And then if it's R7 or above, and
Well, so the 20 feet for an easement is only if it's an above grade easement. So you have elevated platforms and things like that. If it's just an at grade easement, then it's only 10 feet. If it's just the first floor easement that's going to some sort of subgrade station platform.
So if you have an elevator on the first floor, that's not considered above grade?
It's if the station is above grade, really, is what I mean. So it's the 20 feet is for above grade stations. So because presumably an easement for an above grade station is going to potentially take up multiple floors of a development, whereas a below grade station will only have the single floor easement. And so for that, it's 10 feet. If it's an elevated station, then it could be up to 20 feet. Just depends on what the easement looks like, though.
My mistake. Sorry.
It's complicated text sometimes. I get it.
Thank you. Vinny, is your hand still up from before? Do you have another question? Okay. All right, so that does us for questions. We do formally have to open and close the public hearing. That part I cannot do. So let me, the board member, to just call this real quick for us, unless Elsie's back.
I can help out, Angel.
All right, Jason, if you could just open the public hearing, and then we'll see if anyone from the public raises hands. If not, you can close it, and then we can move on to the next item.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Good
you.
evening. We are now in opening up the public hearing as it relates to the zoning text amendment for the train station's ADA accessibility. At this time, I don't see any hands.
You can close it.
Closing the public session. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. So I put it in the chat earlier, but just to remind folks, and we don't have that many people from the public still left, but I think it's very important for us to encourage members of the public to participate in these hearings, or at the very least to be aware of the hearings. If you could spread the word that we did have a hearing for this and that we will continue to accept written testimony that could be submitted to the general inbox of the community board, which is mn11@cb.nyc.gov. The committee will be voting on this, on its recommendation for this proposal at its meeting in June, which is the 9th. So we'll take written testimony until the 6th. That way it can be distributed to the committee for its consideration in advance of its vote on the 9th. So if you could spread the word in your networks, we'd very much appreciate that at the office. And with that, we thank Tony and Marcus for their presentation and explanation. And we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Sendero Verde, Phase 2, the tower. I was expecting a lot of people from the public for this one, but I'm interested, so have at it.
They can't hang on, man. They can't hang on.
Yeah, this is the good part.
They zoomed out.
Hey, Angel, by the way, I'm back. I'm so sorry, guys. I apologize for my absence, but I'm back, Angel.
All right.
We held you down.
Thank you so much.
Sabrina, are you able to share your screen?
I am. Do you want to give a preview? I'll do that.
Yeah, while you're getting started. I can go ahead and do that. Great.
There we go.
So good evening, members of Community Board 11. My name is James Hull. I'm from the Manhattan Planning Team at HPD. I'm joined by Vianda Simmons, who is the Director of Manhattan Planning, as well as our partners for the Sendero Verde Development Team, Sabrina Barker, Jessica Yoon, and Ariel Garcia. We're here to provide some updates on the second phase of this project, which we're anticipating closing in June. I think some things have changed since you last saw the project. So there's been an overall increase in the number of affordable rental units in the project, a reduction in the community facility and commercial space, as well as a reduction in the AMI levels overall. So now I'll turn it over to the development team to walk you through a more detailed overview of the project. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks so much, James. So my name is Sabrina Barker. I'm the development manager. I'm from Jonathan Rose Companies. I'm here to talk specifically about phase 2. Obviously, this is a big development that we've talked about quite a few times with you guys. So I'm sure questions will come up on this first phase as well. Let's go here. So just to orient ourselves to the project, this is Sendero Verde. It's a full block development between East 111th Street over here, East 112th Street, Madison Avenue, and Park. The first phase was, we closed that phase in June of 2019, and it's currently under construction. So these two buildings are under construction along with the public courtyard and the gardens. The phase we're here to talk about today is phase 2, also known confusingly as Building A, which is the tower located on the corner of Madison and East 112th. So just to give an overview of the project, for anyone who might be new to it. So the total project, so all 3 buildings will have 709 units of affordable housing. It includes an 18,000 square foot publicly accessible courtyard in the middle of the 3 buildings. And we have 4 Green Thumb community gardens that are located at the southeast and southwest corners of the site. And then we have over 80,000 gross square feet of community facility space and some ground floor retail on Madison Avenue. As I mentioned, this is currently under construction. I think there's a couple really exciting things about this project. This project was originally conceived of as Sustain NYC, which was an RFP in 2016. And it required that the residential portions of the project be certified to passive house standards. When it's complete, this project will be the largest passive house in the United States and is kind of a precursor to the super energy efficient buildings I think New York City is excited to build in the future, and will kind of get us towards a net zero future. With passive house, it means we have like really thick insulation, an airtight facade, we have triple glazed windows. As you can see, we have solar on the roof, and we're reducing our energy usage probably by about 70% over a typical building. The other exciting thing about this project is we've always conceived of it as, obviously a significant amount of affordable housing, but also, really focused on community driven uses and making sure that we're really focused on providing high quality community facility tenants. So currently we have Union Settlement in the project. They've been there since the very beginning. They're leasing 12,000 square feet on East 111th Street in the smaller building to the south. They will have both senior and youth programming, all day programming there. We have a 51,000 square foot charter school, which is going to be leased to Harlem Children's Zone in the north. And then we also, sorry, this is on our project update page. We've also brought in Acacia, which is our development partner on this deal. They're going to be doing an arts program adjacent to the courtyard. Ariel can offer more details on that, but I'm calling it Acacia Arts. That's not the name of it, but basically they'll be running a community art program similar to what they're doing in Lower East Side, in a space adjacent to the courtyard in the second phase of the project, which is really exciting. So I think we haven't come back to CB11 to talk about the entire development or specifically phase 2 in a while. So we kind of wanted to give some overall project updates about the entire development. We've been very focused, I believe, on phase 1 that's currently under construction. So as James mentioned, we've increased the total number of affordable units from 655 to 709 since we last came to the community board. We did that mostly, so when we were doing our original, like when we were doing the ULURP and we were first in kind of the beginning stages of this project, we didn't know how much exactly how much community facility space each of our users would want. And so we erred kind of on the side of caution, and we had a lot of community facility space in our original plans and our pre-schematic and concept plans. Since then, we've worked with our community facility users to create, the spaces they actually need and actually want and the size that they want. And that has reduced the overall community facility space in the project by a bit since when we last came to CB11. In 2019, to kind of make up for that loss of community facility space, we increased the number affordable units by about 46. And those are located in the base of building B North. We've also increased the affordability of the entire development over time. So I think originally, especially the second phase, we originally had 130% of AMI units in that phase. And we definitely heard from the community board that you were looking for lower levels of affordability. We've been working with HPD for the last couple of years on that. We have lowered the top tier of building A to 90% of AMI, and lowered, especially the top rents to more workforce housing levels, which I think is an exciting development, and we're excited that HPD has worked with us on that. And then, as I mentioned, we've leased the charter school space to Harlem Children's Zone in building B North. And so I wanted just to kind of go over the affordability of the entire project. So on the left side, we have phase 1, building B, which has 361 units of housing. And we have a pretty, quite a lot of income bands in the building B. We will be coming back to you guys in the summer to speak specifically about building B and lease up. We're currently going to be giving our marketing plan to HDC and should be coming back. It'll be probably leasing up next spring in 2022. So as you can see, we have a range of units from 90% of AMI down to 10% at formerly homeless. Phase 2, which we're currently working on, 40% of the building will be at 90% of AMI, and the rest are at 60% of AMI and below. You'll notice we have a larger proportion of formerly homeless households in the second phase, and then slightly larger 50%. But overall, a slightly lower AMIs than I think you've seen before. Per our ULURP, we've retained that 60% of the entire site is below 60% of AMI. And so this is just a site, an overview of the site. You can see the publicly accessible open space in the middle, our courtyard design, and the Green Thumb Community Gardens on the southeast and southwest. Currently, this is what's under construction. You'll notice that the two phases were always contemplated as being kind of nested together. So you see this is currently under construction, and then phase 2, building A, is this L-shaped building, and then just like the tip of the rest of the courtyard. And this is the current view of the project as of about a week ago. This is what's currently under construction. You can see this south building. The facade is nearly complete. They're working on the roof and the solar panels. This is where the second phase will go, kind of in this tiny corner of the lot. And so you'll see this is the tower this is if you were kind of standing on the Park Avenue Metro North tracks. This is the second phase, building A. We're expecting to close in June of 2021 and start construction at the beginning of July. It's a 34-story tower. It has a 3-story podium at the base. It has 348 affordable apartments. And in terms of our community facility space, we have 2 floors of community facility space in the project. The second floor is going to, we have 2 tenants for the second floor. The first is Harlem Children's Zone is going to extend their charter school from phase 1 into phase 2 to accommodate a 5th grade class and some additional administrative offices and a science classroom. We also, as I mentioned before, we will have 2,500 square feet for Acacia, or affiliate of Acacia, to run an arts program for the community located off of the courtyard. We have about 11,500 square feet remaining of community facility space that's located on our 3rd floor with a shared entrance on Madison. I think after we close on the financing in June, we're really going to be focused on finding the right community facility tenant for that space on the 3rd floor. We'd welcome any recommendations that CB11 has for that space if you know of anybody. We've definitely reached out and spoken to quite a few community facility users, but I think it's always easier once you're actually in construction and the space has a clear time frame for delivery. And then we also have 6,200 square feet of ground floor retail space along Madison. And as I mentioned, we'll be completing the corner of the courtyard as part of building A. This is just a breakdown of the AMI mix again to kind of see it. Again, from 90% of AMI down to formerly homeless. There's a mistake on the slide. I'll fix it when I send it to Angel afterwards. There's 35 units at 30% of AMI and 51 at 50% of AMI. We have a full suite of residential amenities in the building that match exactly the phase before. So obviously like bike storage and laundry room. We have a fitness center, a computer lounge, a community room, and then an outdoor terrace on the 4th floor. And this is the unit breakdown. So building A has quite a lot of studios and 1-bedrooms, and then 30% of the building is 2 and 3 bedrooms. And then these are just a couple renderings that show the courtyard that's adjacent to building A. So we have a children's play area and tree grove. I can't remember the technical name we gave this one. Adjacent to building A, they'll be completed. And then this is kind of some of the interior space. This is the lobby and one of our community spaces. So that's what I have for now. Welcome your questions and any other things you have to talk about.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sorry, I was trying to get some dinner.
Totally understand that.
You know, sneakily just trying to get some nourishment in. I think we can all relate. But yes, thank you for your presentation. I love hearing increased affordability units, increased affordability. Those are all great things. I did have one question in regards to the reason for the differences in distribution of rents between the building A and building B. Like this one seemed like pinwheel and this one seemed more.
Yes. So the two buildings are financed using 2 separate HPD term sheets. So building B we financed under the ELA term sheet, which is that like you can have up to 20% at middle income, and then 80% of the building is LIHTC eligible. For building A or phase 2, we used the mix and match term sheet with HPD, which you have to have at least 40% of the building is middle income and 60% is LIHTC eligible. And the reason for that is building A is just, it's an extremely expensive building. So that term sheet worked better just because of its height and kind of the financing constraints on that. But we tried to keep that 40% as low as possible. We would have preferred lower, but.
Yeah, we just wanted, yeah, it's a big boy. It's a big. Okay, so I will open up for our questions from the committee members. Jessica Morris.
Thanks, Elsie. It's really great to see this update, and I think we gave HPD a hard time in the fall, but this is really something special, and so it's exciting to see it come closer and closer to reality. I guess my question is, one, who is the operator? I know there's a sort of development team responsible for constructing and sort of producing the building, but as far as ownership and maintaining the building, this is not a L&M maybe as a partner. I'm not sure who. So there's a lot of maintenance involved in the whole development, and so I guess as it starts to become more and more real, and you have tenants and the prospect of coming online, of course you have to get through the punch list before you can think about maintenance. But it is.
We think about the maintenance first. So we spend a lot of time talking about maintenance. We spend a lot of time talking to HPD about maintenance. So the development is a partnership between L&M Development Partners, Jonathan Rose Companies, and Akasi Network. That partnership will remain, long-term owners of both phases of the project. After construction completion, Rose Community Management, which is an affiliate of Jonathan Rose Companies, will manage both properties. So we have, I guess, an in-house property management staff that will manage the properties. They'll have on-site maintenance. We've also worked with HPD to develop a special maintenance budget for the courtyard as well, since obviously that will require a lot of maintenance and upkeep. And then the other part of it, which isn't necessarily maintenance, but is definitely a portion of operating, is Promessa, which is an affiliate of Acacia, is going to be providing a bunch of social services to the building. So we have 2,300 square feet of social services in Building B North, and that's going to be run by Promessa, and they're going to provide social services for everyone in the building. It includes, a social services director, housing specialist, etc.
And then one follow-up for you, Sabrina, and then a question for George about how this relates to larger questions of affordable housing production and the churn in East Harlem based on what we learned a couple of months ago. So Sabrina, my follow-up is, and I don't want to steal Vinny's fire, but I might a little bit, and ask about local hiring and operations. Is that something that's on your radar in the sort of the maintenance plan? I think there's a huge stewardship component to, what this development does to a kind of a nook and cranny of East Harlem that's at the heart of a place. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily, we talk about local hiring and construction, which is one thing. I think there's a lot of operations and high performance building stewardship is a job of the future. I'm not sure that we have pipelines to that type of future yet here. So this may be an opportunity to develop pipelines to that future if there is some thought and intention to cultivating that type of educational opportunity or just opportunity in general for local residents in helping to steward this asset as it comes online.
Yeah, definitely. I'll probably have to come back to you with our property management group to speak more clearly about, our hiring practices. I think that as a management company and as like a corporate entity, I think Jonathan Rose Companies is very committed to hiring, locally and, educating our residents. I think that we normally, this building A, phase 2 will be 32 BJ, so we'll definitely, we'll be looking to them as well. So yeah, I think those are all good points, and we'll bring in our, when we get closer to opening, we'll bring in our property management group and talk about hiring and also all the education that's going to go into this very special and unique building.
Thank you. And the question for George was, how does this sort of influx of units, George left, says Jason, but the influx of units based on the churn that we understand happens, does, obviously this helps, it's a big number, and they're quality units. I guess we don't have like a running tally for kind of what's in the pipeline as far as there's a lot in the pipeline. And I think that that's something that, we should celebrate and be aware of as we continue to sort of advocate here. So I guess there's no answer to that question, but thanks, Jason.
Thank you. I also had a question, Sabrina, around communications with the surrounding community. I know that the, in terms of like the construction and how's that going, any major feedback from them or anything on what you currently have? Just wanted to know how that communication was being done with specifically the NYCHA development right next door, but also.
I know we, prior to construction, I know the sewer is probably the concern. I know we just started construction on that this past week. And we're definitely, we definitely, I think, sent out flyers and reached out to the NYCHA residents to make sure that they knew of the closure. I think the communication is going well. I've heard that the people to the south of our building really like our facade. The neighbors to the south, I'm hopeful that neighbors to the north will also like the facade once it's done. But I think it's going well with construction. I haven't heard anything specific, but we spoke to our construction team this morning and they said that the sewer closure was going well and they hadn't heard any complaints yet. There are currently 4 flaggers on site for those 2 blocks. So we'll let you know.
Any other committee? Yes, Angel. Not
So
from hand, but I'll take that hand.
yeah, I gotta sign in like as a guest too, so I can raise my hand. So it's Serena or Jessica, whomever. Can you speak a bit? Just a couple of quick things. Can you speak a bit more detail about the Promesa Social Services and about what you may be thinking at this stage in terms of the remaining community facility space, the 11,000 square feet, in terms of users, types of users? I'll start there.
Okay. So, and maybe Ariel can speak more to this. So Promesa is our community or is our social services provider. So for our formerly homeless units, we have received a 1515 grant for all of our formerly homeless units in the project. That comes with significant social services dollars, which is something that was really important to us as a development team. So it'll allow like 24-hour security at both buildings. It'll allow for a social services director and also just on-site staff to be there, you know, running programs, nutrition programs, dance programs. That programming will be available to all residents, not just our formerly homeless residents. But that I think that those social programming dollars are really important, and I think it'll really kind of help the entire community. And also help people in our residential building like access different community resources, and having especially security and stuff on site 24/7. I think is really wonderful. So that's Promesa. For your second question, it was on community facility space. So we had originally, you know, we were coming back to you guys in 2018, 2017. We had originally conceived of a healthcare provider as our kind of our ideal tenant for the community facility space in building A. We currently, that's something that I think we're still pursuing for that 3rd floor, perhaps like a local clinic. I don't know. We've talked to, as I said, multiple people, but we don't have anything firm yet. But we're also looking at, you know, educational providers and you know, other types of healthcare providers, or really anyone that's like, you know, high quality community serving tenants. The floor plate itself, because it's a tower, does have a lot of columns. So it's kind of ideal. It was ideally laid out for, you know, healthcare or like small offices. We've had an interesting time getting 5th grade classrooms on that floor plate, but I think it's worked out. But I think that's going to definitely be our focus as we head after closing, to make sure that we have a really great tenant for our 3rd floor. Or multiple tenants.
Great, yeah. I'd be interested in speaking further about that after this meeting, about the types of uses that can go in there. I have, you know, optimism, but some concern too. So we can just keep chatting.
Sounds good.
And then could you remind me and remind the committee in terms of, since you mentioned Union Settlement on the building facing 111th Street, right? Yep. What is the programming?
Yeah, so they have a pretty cool. So this is their space right here. It's on the corner. The corner space is 12,000 square feet on the ground floor and on the 2nd floor. So on the ground floor, they have some offices. They also have a movement studio. I think their programming is going to be like senior focused in the daytime. So I think they do breakfast service. Adjacent to the courtyard, they have a really big dining area with like a warming kitchen facility. So they do breakfast and then they do lunch. I think they do things like you know, games and bingo and things like that during the day. They have a series of classrooms that are kind of like right here. So there's like an art room, and I think there might be a computer lab that they can offer different you know, daytime activities. And then in the afternoon, it changes over from seniors to youth programming, specifically, I think elementary school aged, and they kind of, run, they have the same classrooms and things they can use for youth. And then I believe, and we can get Union Settlement in here to like talk specifically about their programming since they're, about a year away from opening, that they do like teen programming, so like kind of after in the later evening, like the 5 to 7 range.
That's exciting to hear. Thank you, Sabrina. And then last, quickly, the retail space along Madison Avenue, what have been the thoughts you all have been kicking around in terms of users in that space?
I think we're pretty open to a variety of, I think we would love a community serving, focused. I think originally we were showing like a cafe or something in that space. I think in 2020 retail has been a little hard. So I think, that's another thing we'll be focused on. I think also the timing, this project will be under construction for 3 years. It's going to open in July of 2024. So I think sometimes, especially in retail spaces, we found it's easier once you get closer in the space, we get out of the ground and people can walk through it a little bit and start to imagine their space. It's just a little bit easier than showing people a floor plan and telling them it's going to be really great 3 years from now.
It's going to be really great, trust me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's something that might become a little bit closer to opening.
Okay. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you, Angel. Any last comments or questions before we let Sabrina go grab some dinner for herself? Yes, Ivy.
Hi. Hi, Sabrina. Thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to, ask the facade that's looking onto Park Avenue and the 111th Street facade on the storefront. There's not going to be any opportunity for retail there. That's correct, right? Just Madison?
Yeah, just Madison. So this facade right here, Union Settlement has their facade, and then we have our residential facade, our residential entry here.
And then on the Park Avenue facade, there's like that facade, like the above the podium, basically, like it's pretty blank right now in terms of windows. And I'm just wondering what's going to happen as you kind of go around that corner. And the reason I ask is because I think I live down the street and it's really dark. And there is a big problem, in my opinion, in the whole neighborhood with how the city treats the walkways underneath the Park Avenue viaduct, and just it's really poorly lit, it's really dirty. Like I always run through because I'm terrified of rats. Like you don't know who's around the corner. I think these are really unsafe spaces for families and women in our neighborhood. And I think that activating that southwest area as much as possible in non-daylight hours would be a really good thing, especially considering there's like an empty schoolyard across the street. It's just really dark. And if we're bringing a lot of people into this neighborhood and on this block, I think we need to be cognizant that they might need to cross over to Lexington to take the subway at night. And so what's that experience like? I think that's really important.
Yeah, so unfortunately on this not the south facade, sorry, the east facade of the smaller building, it is a party wall. We do have an out parcel on that. So we have our community garden located on the corner, which will have lighting in it. I think that's something that we discussed with the gardeners, and it will be lit at night. But then there is this out parcel between the garden and our facade. So that's why, let's see, I can find another picture of it.
Yeah, you just had the elevation there.
Yeah, so this is why, so this is kind of, we tried to give it a similar treatment as the rest of the facade as we go around the corner. But we do, eventually this parcel could get built by another developer, unfortunately, and it is kind of an empty lot right now. This facade, it'll wrap the corner. We will have lighting on this, on over here, and this is the entrance up to our public courtyard, which will be, well lit, and we expect this to be pretty activated with children and things like that. because of Passive House, you know, there's more like solid walls in this project than I think, you know, some of like the glacier buildings that go up. I think it's only like 23% windows versus, you know, the rest of the facade is solid. So that's also playing into it in some ways. But I think lighting, we have been speaking a lot about like security and lighting, and that is something that's really important. We've been increasing lighting in all of our properties recently. So
yeah, I think seeing this accent, it gives a lot of information, which is great. I'm really worried about that corner looking at this, and also just considering, because across the street there's development too. And I think if there was some way to activate that corner, whether it's just a mural that's temporary on that facade that we see up there, even if someone else is going to come build later, or like, you know, maybe there's an opportunity for art with lighting, or like some lighting really on the side that's just in front of the viaduct. I think it's just a troublesome corridor, and I think that's important.
Yeah, that is an important point. Jason, I'm going to speak your question just for the record. Do you have a site lighting? Was Jason Villanueva's question too?
Oh, we do. I can send it over.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, thank you for your update. It's always good to hear updates about more affordability and higher affordabilities. And also, we will get you some of these questions and look forward to the presentation being shared, but also the site lighting plan. And was that the last piece of the agenda? I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Let me get it.
So this presentation is on the website, and when Sabrina sends me the updated one with her minor edits, then I'll replace it. But if you go to the current projects page, it's up already, as well as the prior ones.
That being said, we're going to ask for any old business.
I'm sorry, I just have one comment for old business. Since Andrew's not here, it has to do with the budget request that we submitted. We found out through later research that the city agency, I believe the Department of City Planning, does provide training for land use and or ULIP actions. I'm working with our ADM, Carly Wine, to get that information, and then bring it over to our DM and chair.
Thank you. That update. Sorry, my computer's giving up on me right now. Any other old business? New business? Okay, Andrew, roll call.
Okay. Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Elsie Encarnacion.
Present.
Ivy Hume.
Present.
Thank you. Francis Mastroda.
Present.
Jessica Morris.
Here.
Andrew's excused. Vinnie Torres. Did Vinnie leave? Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Stephen Villanueva is absent. Candy.
Present.
Thank you. You have quorum.
Perfect. Angel, I just sent you a message. Can you look at it really quickly?
Oh.
Just wanted to check something before I move forward to adjourn.
No, not tonight. No votes tonight.
Thank you.
Next meeting.
with that, so next meeting we will be voting on the Elevate Transit, which is, you mentioned in the beginning was in June. With that being said, I think we are ready to adjourn our meeting at 8:54. We made it before 9. Yay.
Good night.
Bye, everyone. I will see you guys at 4.
Bye, thank you.
Good night, folks. Elsie, you're great. Thank you.
Good night.